And welcome to the Unknown Webcast. This is just a bit of a trigger warning for those who believe words are more injurious than sticks and stones. I really am so conservative I can't turn left even when I'm driving, which
No, you can't.
made going to Jacksonville this past weekend
Very difficult.
difficult. In addition to giving trigger warnings to our viewers, Ron Hensel and I both drink coffee for your protection. This week, our guest is writer producer Gayla Prewitt, who joins us to look at films and faith storytelling. My
Right.
name is Don Vino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast. And our senior researcher is Ron Hensel. And here is Ronnie Baby.
Greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm tree came out, saw its shadow, and now we have 12 more months of summer. Our sponsor for this edition of the Unknown Webcast is Retouched by an Angel, a new revelation every week. Check local listings for details. Retouched by an Angel, excuse me. Our regular legal disclaimer, our guest on today's webcast, insert name here, that would be Gayla Prewitt, has no connection whatsoever to any of the satirical content of the Unknown Webcast, here referred to as a webcast, although we probably will not mention it again. The satirical content includes any and all commercials, end credits, puns, smart remarks, or anything else that might fall under the definition of satire. In the meantime, Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. bears no liability for or responsibility for anyone's opinions regarding this satirical content. Notice the opinions expressed in this webcast are ours and should be yours too. If you enjoy it or if it really annoys you and you want to inflict it on someone else to ensure your continued access, please go to midwestoutreach.org, click the yellow donate button, and contribute as you feel led. And as you do, never fear. This webcast is Y2K compliant. And don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite video channels. And now, introducing our special guest, Gayla Prewitt.
Hello, how are you?
A very warm welcome for you here.
I like the fake applause.
Right, well, that's actually an upgrade. We used to have fake applause in which I would literally sit here and just clap my fingers and go like that. So we decided to pluck down. Actually, it was no money at all. We just found it on the web.
Yeah, right. We invested heavily in looking for one that was free.
Yeah, it was a lot of work. At least a couple of minutes of web searches right there.
Exactly. Kind of like our Bible buffet thing. Anyway, we're really glad to have you here. Now, I was just looking. We did a show 6 or 7 months ago with an author, and for some reason, I'm having a 72-year-old brain aneurysm or something. My mind is gone.
You make it sound so serious when you say that. You know.
Yeah, well, it's so serious.
I can call 911 right now. What you're saying is you don't remember who this was because you're asking the wrong person if you're asking.
Yeah, I know that's true, but he did a really good book. I want to say it was The Philosophy Murders. And he was very interesting guest because he's a Christian writing, in this case, about a serial killer who's using philosophy to determine who's going to live and who's going to die, as he's killing philosophy professors.
Wow.
And so he asks them a worldview question, and if tell me from your worldview why I shouldn't kill you.
From my worldview?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
And because their worldview provides no reason not to kill somebody, then he'd kill them.
He would argue to the end of their, to try to show he's actually, it sounds like the author of the book is showing how very few worldviews really give a fundamental reason for why anything is right or wrong.
Right. And in the process of telling the story, he has the son of a Baptist pastor who's going to, I believe it's Harvard. And wokeism has sort of taken over the institution and infecting him. He's not really prepared for dealing with these worldview issues. And I won't spoil this tale for anybody. But it is really quite one. And one of the main characters is atheist agnostic, let's say, but he does hold to sort of Judeo-Christian morality, and
Right.
and had that when he was growing up, which he's largely rejected. But then he has to come to terms with when he is the one captured, answering the question, which he
Hmm.
does from a biblical perspective. So it's a pretty interesting story.
Oh, I
Now,
imagine.
the elements that I liked in it, which is sort of what brings me to us to wanting to talk about this, is this. I think in large part, Christians have lost the art of good storytelling.
Mhm.
And I cannot tell you how many Christian films I just don't watch because they do what I would call Jesus smuggling into the
Mhm.
story. And that means this. There are ways to bring the faith into the story, including the gospel, that go naturally with the flow of the story.
Right.
Now, I don't know if Rick Mofina, he's an author, is a Christian or not, but there's a lot of faith in his stories, which are, murder stories and different things like that. Uh, and he includes a great deal of faith um, narrative in it through the characters, some pro, some con, but it's pretty well done. There are others that take a story that is not really about faith at all and just sort of jam it into the story
Mhm.
because of the desire for evangelism. I get that, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be good at our craft of
Right.
storytelling, right?
Right.
Uh, and so our team, some of our team, Ron wasn't part of this, uh, about 2 months ago, just watched a film that is supposedly a faith-based film, which is essentially sort of a remake of It's a Wonderful Life. And that's okay. Remakes are done all the time. Unfortunately, it was a very bad remake of a story that already had really bad theology in it.
Mm.
So I, I was supposed to write back to them to give them our take, and I thought I can't even I can't even tell them this in a way that's going to be kind. It's just going to because it's a terrible film. So that brings me to them this: when I teach on worldviews to high school students, I lay out here are the worldviews you could have, and then I advise them that every book you read, magazine you pick up, news source you watch, film you observe,
Mhm.
it has a worldview embedded in it. And your task, in a sense, is to know what is the worldview of the maker of this,
Mhm.
and how does that then influence the content you're receiving because you're getting ideas via osmosis. It's just coming through your eyes and your ears and your brain, and it's unchecked to ask the questions. And then we watch a film called Hidalgo, which has three worldviews in it. At the end of which, I ask them, okay, now you watched the film, entertaining film, well done, interesting story. Um, which worldview is the least helpful? Which worldview is the most honorable? And which worldview is chosen by the producers to be the most admirable and best? And then they kind of wrestle around with it. And what you come out with is the Christian worldview is the worst because they're the thieves and the liars and the criminals
Mhm.
in the film. Islam is the most honorable because they acknowledge the best worldview in the film, which is animism, American Indian animism. And after they do that, they go, I never even caught that before. I said, that's the point.
Yeah.
You're learning worldviews without even realizing you're being taught worldviews. Now, why is all that important? Because you're doing a worldview film, basically.
Mhm.
What is it? And we can show this. I think this might be helpful to the audience. If I do this, screen share. There we go. There we go. That guy, and voila, we have Glimmer. Every life has a story, a sanctity of life thriller film. So you kind of tell everybody right off front what the worldview is that you're communicating, right?
Right. And actually, for marketing, if it ever becomes a film, it probably would drop the sanctity of life because I want people to get that from the message in the film. But I want a more varied audience to come, not just people who already believe in the sanctity of life.
Right.
So, kind of like what you were saying, and even what you, when your show opens, it says, "Because I've told you the truth, now I'm your enemy." And I think when it comes to this issue, people really shut down. They don't want to hear another idea or another view, because if you have a view of sanctity of life, then you're anti-woman. And so that's why I wrote the film the way I did. I really wanted people just to come and watch a thriller, and hopefully they will get that message. That's the point of it, that every life is important from the beginning. Preborn life, all life is important. And so yeah.
That's true, and that might turn some people off. That's also true, and that is unfortunate.
Yes, it is unfortunate. But even our own, well, not to get political, but even we have a two-party system mostly in this country, and even the party that's always stood for life, now it's not even really part of their platform, as far as I understand. And I've heard, if the more they talk about abortion, they've been told that the more likely they will lose the election. So I think it's a pretty sad commentary that if our country has become that immoral, that we're afraid if we speak up for life of preborn children, that we can't be effective in this society anymore. And so
Right.
I think hopefully, by telling a story in a different way, that people that might be offended by just coming right out and talking about that issue, that they'll be engaged and it will affect their emotions. And then there's a revelation at the end that I hope will really get them to thinking. I'm even at the end, I have some video that I want to play of recently you talked about owning, property. And I think David J. Harris just recently showed a video of a sonogram of a little baby waving. And then you saw a little baby waving that's already born. And he used the tagline, "Same person, different location."
Right.
And so, yeah, we're not supposed to own people in this country. Even as parents, you don't own your child. And we know ultimately they're gods and we're supposed to protect them. And but yeah, a lot of people already will just shut down if you start talking about that. We talk about messaging, and that's why Christian films need to do a better job. Films with faith-based messages need to do a better job, because they need to be entertaining first, so you get people to watch them, and then hopefully the message will come through. And so, yes, and you'll hear a lot of Christian filmmakers talk about, we need to have better, it's called production value, where the
Yes. Yes.
coloring, the sound, the acting, the storytelling. Obviously, it all starts with the story. But yes, I agree. Christian films, we need to do a better job. And I do think some of the recent films that have come out are doing that, and they're competing with mainstream Hollywood.
Have you seen the film The Island by chance?
No, I have not.
Okay. It is not made by not written by a Christian, as far as I know. It is not made by a Christian film company, and yet it is dealing with the same kinds of issues that you're dealing with here. Uh, and it's the question of what constitutes a being having human rights.
Hmm.
Does a human have human rights based on being human? And as you go through the story that's being told, you have all these people that believe that there's been some sort of a Holocaust out there. And so they're living on this island of protection, sort of thing, so to speak. And then they're living in this place, and then they get the opportunity to go to the island, which is like paradise. As you get into the story, though, what you discover is all of them are clones of some very wealthy person on the outside of the
Oh,
facility.
wow.
And they were created to be extra body parts for these individuals, should they become injured, brain dead,
Right.
heart, whatever, then they do this whole thing where the individual inside, who's owned by the donor, is told that they won the lotto to go to the island, which means once they leave, they don't realize this until they get out. They are going to be carved up into needed body parts for the owner of the individual.
Mhm.
And so it's a very compelling story, just toying with this idea of, do humans, based on being human, have human rights?
Well, and that brings to mind to me the question around vaccination. And I was really, because, some of the vaccines were originally developed using aborted fetal tissue. And even though they're years old, it's still, that's how they were made. And I was very disappointed in some of the religious organizations because they came out and said, well, we can't not do that because people could die. And I'm like, and like you were saying, do we take other people's parts so we can live? I mean, is that really the society that we want?
We can't even take their clothing styles because that would be cultural appropriation, but we can take their body parts,
Exactly.
It's like, we have a free floating ethics and morality there. It's, ethicist Peter Singer, like 31 years ago, was arguing that we should be able to terminate a human life up to 30 days after birth.
Up to 2 years.
Well, this is 1993. Since
Okay.
then, I think he's modified it.
Right.
And what's his definition of personhood? You're not, in his mind, you're not considered a person unless you possess particular cognitive abilities. You have to have self-awareness, the ability to think, the ability to feel pleasure and pain. Well, you can be 6 weeks along in the womb and feel pleasure and pain.
There's video of that.
Right. And how do you establish self-awareness and ability to think for anybody? I mean, we have people who've been in comas who apparently are total vegetables, but when they come out of the coma, it turns out, no, they were able to hear and understand everybody in the room.
Well, and you bring up an interesting point because to me, we are on the other opposite end doing things as well. And I'm sure you've heard of Dr. Ron Emanuel.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And people don't have value.
Don't confuse him with Rahm Emanuel. I was confused for a second there. Remember him. But anyways, go ahead.
Well, I mean, he basically, and I don't know how old he is now, but, he says he doesn't want to live past 70 because he's not productive, wouldn't be a productive member anymore. And he puts value on human life based on, and I think it's like until you're 14, because you've had enough training then that you could contribute, and then up to 40. But everybody else.
Well, that's basically the Nazi Party's definition of personhood right there. Are you productive? Are you... Yeah.
And I believe he was in charge of a lot of the COVID policies under Biden. So, and I've had my own journey too with, my husband was in the hospital and I saw things that I never thought I would see.
Really?
So yeah, that's a whole nother, and this was after I'd already written Glimmer. I've written a book about that too. But, yeah, there's, studies, and these are in medical journals, that 39% of American doctors admit giving drugs to hasten death. Well, to me, if you're hastening death, you're killing somebody. So yeah, and Dr. Everett Koop talked about this a long time ago, about if we're going to kill babies, then why would we care to kill the elderly or the very sick? They're costing us money and things like that. So yeah, it's life. We don't respect life.
We've killed so many, we've got to import them from other countries now.
Yeah. Isn't that sad? Yeah.
Especially if they vote a particular way. But anyways, we are so post-Christian, we don't even realize it. I remember watching, back in the 60s, I remember watching an episode of Bonanza, which it was really centered on a mercy killing.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, the question was, is this ethical or legal? And the episode came down squarely on the position of no, under no circumstances, even if you think you're being merciful, does one human being ever have the right to take the life of another. So that was the 60s. We've come a long way down since then.
Well, I experienced it personally with my husband, and I was shocked. So,
Would you care to elaborate on that?
well, okay, my husband, 2 years ago in May, he got sick. He was a retired fireman, 56 years old, and we found out he had leukemia. So he went through 3 rounds of chemo, which we never thought we'd do something like that either, but we had to. And we weren't presented with any other options, you know. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, he ended up getting infection. His leukemia was in remission, but he got an infection, and he was at a large hospital. And there's really horrific things that happened in there. But finally, I didn't realize at the time there was all kinds of things they were doing that I didn't even know they were doing. And they were heavily sedating him with fentanyl. And and then they come in when I think, okay, his infection was finally gone. There was a lot of mistakes made, but they got rid of his infection. And so a doctor came in that I'd never seen before and sat down in front of me and said, let me tell me about your husband. So I'm thinking, oh, he wants to know his medical history. He's going to come up with a new plan. His leukemia is in remission. His infection's gone. So I'm thinking he just needs to get stronger. And he goes, well, I told him about my husband, how caring and loving he was, and his medical, and I showed him his picture. I wanted to know him, who he was. And he goes, what's time you do something for him? And he goes, it's time we do compassionate end of life care. And the nurse standing beside him, this is after they're already heavily sedating him with massive doses of intravenous fentanyl, and they'd been doing it for days, which I didn't know, and some other things that you're not really supposed to mix. She goes, we could be very aggressive with the Ativan and the morphine.
Oh my.
Yeah. And I looked at her and I said, it's not up to you. It's not up to me. It's up to God. Right. And they just stared at me. You would have thought me saying that, they would be like, what do you mean? We're not, no, they just stared at me in silence. So, it's taken a long time. I mean, it shocked me what I saw in that particular hospital. I never thought in America. And I've since done a lot of research, and I'm not crazy. I thought at first I have to be crazy. There was another incident. The nurse came down in the middle of the night. He ended up having sepsis because they didn't treat his infection properly. And, I caught him in the middle of the night, turning down his blood pressure mesh that was sustaining him. And I said, what are you doing? And this was 2 days before he died. And like I said, his infection had just cleared. And he goes, and I watched his blood pressure just plummet, because when you have septic shock, that's one of the dangers, is your blood pressure bottoms out. And he goes, they said, we're just prolonging the inevitable. My husband had only been in the hospital a week at this time.
Wow.
And I begged him, and he finally turned it back up. So that was my first inkling that they weren't trying to help him anymore. They were trying to hurry him up. And
right.
When we went there, we had hope. I mean, his leukemia was in remission and he had an infection, but they said they could treat the infection. And so,
we have what, now this is not specifically what we're talking about here, but it does impact the discussion. We've written several articles on this. We've talked about this on our show, that we have literally left the Christian faith for morality.
Yeah.
Issues of morality.
Yeah.
And so what takes its place is kind of scary, even to the atheists. It's been interesting to watch the atheists start defending Christianity, like Dawkins, for example, not Scott, but Tom Holland, writing in defense of Christianity. They're not Christians, they're still atheists.
Right.
They're attending church because they like the Christian ethos, and they're seeing what comes after. The problem is, without actual Christians supporting Christianity, the ethos by itself is not going to survive. That's the problem.
Right.
Now, I don't know if you know Scott Klusendorf, but he has a very nice test on the question of human life. It's called SLED, SLED. It's size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. Those things makes it a little
Oh,
easier to discuss. Uh,
no.
an unborn is clearly smaller than a born human. But then again, I am larger than my granddaughter. Does that make me more human than her?
Hmm.
So level of development. An unborn is less developed than a born human being. For example, a 4-year-old female is not ready to produce children, whereas a 13 or 14-year-old may be. Does that make her more human by virtue of being able to bear children? Environment, that's the location where you live.
Hmm.
So if you live, I don't know, let's say if you live in, Ron, where do you live?
Cape Coral, Florida.
If you live in Cape Coral, Florida, can you pass a law that says anyone in Cape Coral, Florida is no longer considered human? You could do that
Sometimes
because
when I'm driving, I want to. I think about that law.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Scuba divers can swim underwater, and spelunkers can crawl through caves. Are equally as valuable as humans as those who ride hot air balloons. So where you are located doesn't determine if you're a human or not.
Right.
And then degree of dependency. If you are, I don't know, in a coma, for example, and we have somebody we've been praying for a long time. He was in a coma from an accident for, I don't know, 4 months. Does that mean that during that time he was no longer human until he came out of the coma? What about if you're
Some
sleeping
doctors would
even?
think so. you know,
Pardon?
I think some doctors anymore would think that. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, that's the problem.
Hmm.
Is because they are using faulty criteria to determine what human is. And I think these 4 criteria are very helpful. You also had Dr. Aveda King is interested in this project.
Yes.
Hmm.
Talk to
Um,
us about that.
Yeah, as you know, she's quite the champion for life. Now, she does share her story. She has had, I think, believe 2 abortions when she was younger. And I think the reason this story resonates with her, she, as a young woman, believed the lies that they're telling, that this is, like you were saying, this isn't a human, it's just a clump of cells. And she was almost aborted as a child as well. But her grandpa, Martin Luther King Sr., told her mother that's not true. And he had a vision that he goes, that's my granddaughter in there, and she's got red hair. And it
Hmm.
was Alveda, Dr. Alveda King. And she has a saying, from the womb to the tomb. And I think that's very telling because, yeah, life is life. And as we know, at the moment of conception, all the DNA is there. All the components to make that it is a baby. And I believe the soul is there. So from the Christian point of view.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how, there's not going to be any changes other than growing. And so,
Right.
like you said, if your size has to do with it, then yeah, are bigger people more human than smaller people? And there's even been, of course, they explain it with it's a zinc interaction, which I'm sure chemically they're right, but I'm sure you've seen the videos of the flash of light at the moment of conception.
Yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah.
Well, and the U.S. News and World Report even published an article about it. I think in 2015, they said with microscopes now they can see that. And so,
Really?
yes.
Wow.
And, and of course, like I said, I believe it's God creating life, let there be light. And so, and that's why with Glimmer, I'm hoping to, I can tell you a little bit about the story if you'd like.
Sure.
It's about a mom who's searching for a daughter. Everyone else said,
Well, hold that. We want to have them have bated breath for a moment
Oh,
because
yeah. We want
we
a
do
moment
want
of
to hear from our
suspense.
sponsor.
Yeah, they have stories too. We want to talk about. Wait a minute. You know what? This is the wrong slide. Okay, I'm sorry. Here we go. Uh, Cynthia's life is in crisis. She doesn't know if she can believe she's a sinner. How will she break the news to her parole officer?
Oh my.
Jacob is still in shock. His pastor laughed when he suggested he might be the reincarnation of Elvis. Will he ever find a church that supports his spiritual views? Charity is engaged to Brad, who is already married to Betsy. That won't be a problem in Brad's and Betsy's polygamous cult, but Charity wonders, how will all this work out in the afterlife? All these people have one thing in common. They're looking for a gospel that's been retouched by an angel. If your gospel bothers you, have it retouched with a new revelation every week. Consult your local listings for details. Retouched by an angel. So our sponsor is now happy. You can wait for that story to come out. In the meantime, let's hear this one.
Yeah, well, it centers around a young woman, I should say, and she remembers a daughter everyone else said never existed. And so in the story, you really don't know what's going on. You don't know, is Margot insane?
Or did she chills here? This is already I'm already like, ooh.
Or is she or people trying to do something to her, even her husband? If the story starts out, you see Margot, and she has the baby, and her husband and her are together with the child. They read stories, but then all of a sudden she goes into the little girl's room. It's not there. I mean, it's been replaced by office furniture. And so not only is the little girl gone, any remnants of her, who she was, is just vanished. And so her husband I think they call the police, and then he tells the police, we never had a daughter. I don't know what's going on with her. We never had a daughter. So in the whole story, you don't know, did she have a daughter? Was Zoe real? And I wanted to take the audience on a journey, just like when a person loses a child in the neighborhood. If someone loses a 4-year-old child, by this time in the story, Zoe's 4, and you watched her grow. Everybody comes out to find that child. You want to find that child. I mean, I think that's just humanity. You're not going to not help them find that child. And so that's kind of the journey that the audience is taken on. You have clues that maybe Zoe was real, but no, maybe not. And until the end, you don't know. And so I want them rooting for Margot to find Zoe. And then there's this revelation, and I'm hoping it will bring home that, yes, those babies inside the tummy are the same 4-year-old you see right now. And most people hopefully would not make the same decision that they're making when the baby's still in the tummy. And so that's kind of the mission of the story. Is it's a thriller, but it has a message.
Yeah, that sounds like I'm already like ready to buy a ticket for that,
Where are you at with the project? You have it done, apparently.
I have the script done, and I also did try to get the story out there. This is basically the screenplay in novel form. It's not a novel. I'm not a novelist, but I did fill it in. It's not just characters, but it's very short. But we have a fundraiser right now, and I did partner with Christian Ministry Alliance. So we're trying to raise $1.9 million, which is a lot of money, but not
really
for films. And anybody who donates to it, it is a tax-deductible donation because of the partnership, physical sponsorship with Christian Ministry Alliance. And so I have that on my webpage where people can go, and if they want to donate, and there's no amount too small. If you want to donate $2, I mean, that's anything, or prayers or whatever. So that's where we're at right now. I have a film crew in place that could help me with the film.
Wow.
And Dr. Alveda King is supposed to, if the schedule, to do a cameo role in the film. And so, but that's kind of where we're at. We're just needing the funds.
We have a member of our church who has written screenplays, and he submitted them. I don't know that any of them have ever been produced, but
right.
It's really a very competitive business. I've learned a lot about it from talking to him, and he's submitted them to competitions and won competitions. It sounds like you're going a different route. I mean, it's not really technically the strictly commercial route that he's attempted to go.
Well, I tried that for a long time, and I feel like you really have to produce your own, especially when you're not. You don't have the connections, and mine has been recognized at film festivals too.
Okay.
Yeah, and so it's been nominated. It's been a selection. It's been I think a quarterfinalist.
Wow. So a lot of people have read your screenplay
Mhm.
and believe that it is worthwhile, worthy of being produced.
Yes,
That's huge.
yes,
That's really huge. I'd be interested in letting my friend know about yours now and see. He would just as interest. He's a
right,
Christian. He goes to our
right.
church, and he would definitely be interested in a pro-life type of film, a drama. He actually tends to try to write comedies, but I'm sure he'd be
Okay,
interested in this.
that's hard. I admire people who can do
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
I'm, I can't do
Yeah,
that.
he's done. So, but this sounds great. I mean, it sounds like you're pretty far along. Do you
Well,
have a timeline that is kind of coming up, or?
it's dependent upon the funds. So I've been just recently, I put a pitch deck together, and I believe I sent that to you, Don, and to kind of visualize it. And I used AI to show the story. And so I'm going to start reaching out to organizations, and hopefully they'll help me get the message out. And, sometimes you can list people as executive producers in organizations and things like that. So that's kind of what I'm waiting on. I am also working on a totally different project, and it's, I think, moving forward. So I'm excited about that. And I'll let you know if that comes out. It's with a former lead singer of Santana,
Oh, really?
who became a Christian. I don't know if you've ever heard of Leon Patillo.
Yes, I've heard of. Oh, yeah, he was big in Christian music like
Yeah, so
40 years ago.
we wrote together, him and his wife and I, and that was a totally, and I know this sounds but it was a totally God thing that we made a connection. And so he reached out to me, and we're moving ahead on that one as well. So, and he's big in also suicide prevention
Hmm.
of teenagers, and he's got a ministry that's called Sing Kids, and so he's been doing that for years. But yeah, we're talking with a production company, and we're in the fundraising stage on that too. But he has a few more resources than I do, so
Yeah, I would think. Yeah.
yeah. So hopefully that will be coming out here soon.
Okay.
So Patrick asked a question: do you hold auditions?
Well, when we get to that point, yes, he can contact me, and hopefully we'll have a casting director, and he can
Yeah.
make a connection that
So,
way.
do you have
Sure.
a picture? Do you have a picture of Zoe in your mind? Who would like the kind of little girl? I mean, obviously, if you pick a child actress today, by the time you
Right.
get around to producing, that child actress might be in middle school or something, or high
Right.
school.
Well, yes, I do. And I kind of have that in my pitch deck because, just like a long haired, little girl, but it doesn't have to be that way. It's probably more of, I'm sure the actors couldn't exactly be four, so they probably need to look a little younger for their age because there's quite a few lines, but sometimes some 4-year-olds can do quite a bit.
What
So
kind of personality does Zoe have?
she's spicy.
Okay. So we're going to like to watch this movie because, I mean, children, my grandfather, I kind of like to model myself on my grandfather. You ever see that bumper sticker that says, if I'd have known grandkids were this much fun, I'd have had them first.
Yes, I've not seen it, but I've heard things like that before.
Yeah, that
I'm
was
getting ready to be a grandma for the first
that was literally my grandfather. I mean, he was like all about the grandkids.
Yeah.
And so when kids are running, after the service, kids are running around having fun, being loud. I love it. Other people go, "You're in church." I go, "Let them alone." That was what my grandfather would have said.
Yeah.
So I like kids to be fun. I like kids to be kids, and I think this is kind of a haunting plot line you've come up with.
But it has a redemptive ending, and there's also other issues that are addressed in there. She ends up going to a homeless mission, and we see that issue, and so it's not just about the sanctity of life inside here. It's also some of the struggles people have when they're here too. So she goes to a homeless mission and meets a character called Mama James, and so anyway, yeah. But I think it's a redemptive story, and I'm hoping that other people will see like I've said before, that life is there. It's just you haven't had a chance to meet them yet in here, but they're in there. So,
There was a film a few years ago, sci-fi science fiction film called Arrival,
okay.
which it's very different, but it was the film is kind of a time displacement type film that involves the arrival of
Is it aliens or something?
these aliens come and they experience time in a very different way, and apparently because of their presence, people who get close to their ship also
Oh,
experience this time dislocation thing. And one of the things you learn is that it's almost like time is going in a different direction. Uh,
okay.
and so this woman who's a scientist trying to learn how to communicate with these beings who communicate in a totally different way than we do, she experiences it too. And so in this sequence, she has a child that it's like, I'm still kind of confused as to what happened. I don't, it was like, uh, there's a child she no longer has. And I think this was a child that was actually born though, but she keeps on experiencing the child as if she still had it or something like that.
Oh, oh,
So when you tell this story, because because now she's going in two different directions in the space
right,
time continuum, you
right,
know. Um, so when you tell this story, it reminded me a little bit about that, but it's a
right.
very different because um, you when my dad died,
Hmm.
I kept having dreams for years. I'd wake up and I just had a dream where he was alive.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, you come to the dreams always ended in a very similar fashion, and that was um, I I was talking to my dad. We were like catching up or whatever.
Right.
Then it dawned on me. Wait a minute. What about my stepdad? It's like my mom
Mhm.
remarried a few years after he died. She remarried a widower,
Right.
and it was like I was left in this confused state, and then I'd wake up. And I shared this with my grandmother. This is going back a long time. And she goes, I have the same kind of dreams.
Oh, wow. That sounds like my family.
Yeah. And so I thought, okay, I guess that makes me normal. In this case, it's like, it's not really a dream. It's, she's experiencing this child as if she
Right.
raised it,
Right.
raised
Right. And she can't get anybody to listen to her. And so, yeah.
her. Hmm.
Yeah. So, okay, just a quick note here. The book I was thinking about was written by Brian Godwa, Godwa. It's called Cruel Logic, uh, and it's a very well written story, the kind that we've talked about earlier, the kind that you're describing with your film. Uh, which then brings me to the next thing. As you pointed out, there are many today within the church who feel like we can't really compete with culture. We can't
Mm-hmm.
challenge them well. And I don't agree with that. Um, Now, depending on your eschatology, sometimes gives you more of a defeatist attitude, I think,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. But having said that, our task, our calling, never was to transform culture. It never was.
Right.
Our task, our calling is to have transformed lives, proclaim the gospel so that they will have transformed lives and be born again. That
Right.
is our calling. An added benefit was that culture was transformed by enough transformed lives by
Mm.
the gospel.
Right.
Okay. So I think that that's an important aspect. Having said that, uh, when Jesus was proclaiming the gospel, he was essentially, I just spoke on this past weekend, actually, at the conference. Uh, he was a missionary to the household of faith. If we go through the Old Testament, the prophets were missionaries to the household of faith. They were going to those within the faith community, whether they were believers or not, they were all part
Mm-hmm.
of the tribe, if you will. Jesus says, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So during his earthly ministry, who did he go to? The household of faith. Once they accepted, the next step then was to go outside the household of faith,
Mm-hmm.
or they're set aside. So when they are preaching, say in Acts 2, they're appealing to the household of faith from the documents of faith that they already accept. That's the Old Testament.
Okay.
Paul does a kind of a different thing. He goes to outside the household of faith to Mars Hill. And where does he quote from? He doesn't quote from the scriptures. He gets to the gospel, what the scriptures teach. He explains who God is, but he does it from their poets and prophets,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
What you're doing in this film, and I think what we need to do in our storytelling is to explain to unbelievers who we are, where we come from, uh, what our condition is before God, and how we come to resolution with that so that we have peace with God.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be done powerfully, I think, as you're trying to do in your film here, because what you're telling them is, I came through this process uh, by which I came into existence in the womb of what we know as a woman.
Right. Right.
and and once that point happened, God has already orchestrated how all of that will develop into me becoming physically born,
Mm-hmm.
and then continuing to grow and change and be transformed to be more of what I already am. If it's a woman, you'll be able to have children, et cetera, et cetera. If you're male, you'll be able to participate in the process of at least impregnation. So we all have a role to play that's already pre-designed
Mm-hmm.
into us.
Right.
It didn't happen by accident.
No. Well, and I mean, even just the whole process, I don't know how anybody could not believe in a God, because there's so many miracles that have to happen inside there for that baby to grow and mature. And so, yes, and yeah, it doesn't happen by accident. And I feel like even the film is for, unfortunately, I think a lot of Christians are buying into the language of, viability and things like that. We just recently had election, as you know, and one of the candidates, I asked him what his position was on life, and he was a doctor, and I thought a Christian, and maybe he is, I don't know, but he said, well, viability is at 16 weeks, and I'm like, oh, wrong answer. Wrong
Right.
answer. So I feel like maybe we need to even be reminded sometimes, because messages are over and over and over again, and obviously that's where prayer and reading our Bible, which I don't do near enough
My
of.
my next question to him would have been, why did we invent the iron lung? I mean, why
Exactly.
bother? Why bother? There's no viability
That's
without
true.
the iron lung. I mean, for many polio patients and other patients
Right.
of other diseases, who some of them were dependent on an iron lung for decades.
Well, he's a heart surgeon.
You'd think he would know. That's why I think he would hopefully.
That's a good idea. I didn't think about that. I
Well, why
just,
did we invent the? Maybe we should have never invented the iron lung. Now that you mentioned viability.
well, all of medicine. I mean, why would we do any of it? I mean, because if you can't live without it, then you're not viable anymore. So,
Yeah,
why do we do that? So
yeah,
that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that one.
right.
Right.
So
It's the same thing. You have kidney machines while somebody is
yeah,
waiting
why invent
for,
the dialysis machine?
Right.
right?
Exactly. No, exactly. I totally agree. And so, yeah, I'm just hoping that, even, like I said, even Christians, and then I do have some of the videos that I want to include at the end with the light at the beginning and the hand waving. And the other day I saw, now they have 3D ultrasounds. And of course, the baby was
Really?
33
Wow.
weeks, but the father's talking to the baby, and you can see the baby when he talks. It's the baby smiles.
Really? I'd like to see
Yeah,
that.
well, I've got it. I can send it to you if you'd like.
Okay.
I think actually Focus on the Family did an article on it, and they're the ones that included it in their thing. And yeah, and he will talk, and then the baby smiles, and then it's really neat. So, and I think people need to remember that those are babies from the beginning. They're babies,
Right.
and
Right.
so
See, and that's why films like this, and we're gonna be praying that you do raise up enough finances to do this,
thank
because
you.
it is films like this that can help to educate people on what is really going on, challenge their worldview.
Right,
Uh, some years ago, this is kind of funny. I'm not really a debater per se. Um, I mean, I do debating individually on whatever issues, and like being engaged in a discussion. But I was asked by a college group to debate a professor on campus on creation versus evolution.
oh wow.
I had never debated formally at all, but I thought, "Oh, it could be fun. I'll try it. I'll try most anything." And
You're not like the rest of us, Don, who just think of being utterly humiliated and abject failure.
yeah,
We
no,
have
I
to
don't
do
think of
things
that.
like
I
that.
think I think this will be an interesting experience, however it works out.
I might look like a total fool, but I'll have fun doing it.
And so I agreed. Well, then the professor uh, asked the group if I was an old Earth creationist or a young Earth creationist, and then they asked me. I said, "Well, I tend toward a young Earth view, but that's really not the issue. The issue is how did everything come into
Right.
being, not when. I don't care really how long ago it was." And so he said, well, he would not debate a young Earther, and so he wouldn't get stuck in a room with a young Earther. He said,
Too late.
which well, I thought it was interesting, so he canceled. So they asked me to continue and come anyway, which I did, and I did a presentation, creation versus evolution. And at the end, several students that had come were upset, and they said, "Well, the way you tell it sounds like creation is true." And I go, "Well, duh." Uh,
Really? Oh.
yeah,
You say that like it's a good thing.
yeah. So they asked that professor then to come and give his presentation, and someone let me know, and I showed up, and it was great fun. And I sat in the front row, and I listened to him very kindly give his presentation, didn't interrupt at all. And then he asked for, if anyone has any questions, and shot my hand right up, and he inadvertently called on me. Uh,
Not knowing
and
who
I
you
said,
were, that he was in the
I,
same room with you, a young
yeah,
Earth creationist.
exactly. So I said, okay, now I have a question, but it's going to take me a moment or two to get to it because I have to set it up. Let's assume, just for the sake of discussion, that, as you explain it, everything popped into existence from nothing for no apparent reason. Let's just assume that's true. Let's assume then that in that new from nothing to something scenario, um, it kind of just separated itself into, I don't know, we'll call them planets and stars and suns, and let's just assume that happened. And then let's further assume that at least on one of those orbs in space, I don't know, we could call it Earth, just for the sake of discussion, a primordial soup sort of just appeared on the planet for no apparent reason. It just kind of happened. And then in that soup, you had sloshing around of chemicals, which we don't know where they came from, but they just appeared in the soup, and that's okay. And then lightning struck it, and 21 amino acids just popped into existence and stuck together, and you had life. Let's assume all of that is true. Now, here's my question. How do you go from divide and multiply reproduction, which is arguably the easiest method? You don't have to meet anyone. You don't have to date. You don't have to take anyone to the movies or buy dinner. You just divide and multiply. How do you get
Cheesecake.
from that to male female reproduction? It
Mhm.
seems to me that you can't have it if one element is even out of place.
Yeah.
That's why we have, fertility clinics and things, because if one thing is awry,
Mhm.
reproduction doesn't happen. So it sounds like what you have to have is, at some point, a fully developed female pop into existence somewhere, and you're not done yet because you have to have the other part of the equation, a fully formed female pop into existence. and you're still not done. They have to pop into existence at about the same time in history, or they don't meet. I mean, if they're 300 years apart, it's just not going to work. And they have to pop into existence at about the same location. One in Alaska, one in Argentina is not really going to be helpful.
Yeah.
So they have to pop into existence at about the same time in about the same location in approximately, ready to like each other. That's going to be an element
He
as
sat through
well.
this entire setup too. Or he waited.
And he let me do that whole thing. He was kind of
Okay.
waiting, and then I said, "So, how do you get from divide, multiply to male, female reproduction in light of all of that?" And he stood there for a few minutes and thought about it, and then he said, "I have no idea, but I think somebody probably does."
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, somebody will figure it out. Yeah, well, I did the same exact thing when I was, but I did it when I was a sophomore in high school, so I cut myself some slack. Uh, I remembered specifically having been taught in biology that we had in previous grade school levels we had a respiratory system, a circulatory system, and a nervous system, and all of these systems were very complex. They pervade the entire body, and if we don't have any one of them, we're dead. We can't survive without a respiratory system, a circulatory system, or a nervous system. And I remember learning about all of those. And then my biology, this is back in the days of overhead projectors. You go to an archaeology class and find out about those now. But we put my biology teacher put an overhead of the lymphatic system. It pervades the entire body. It's complex. And if we don't have it, we're dead. Now there were four things that had to come together. And I remember I was an agnostic. And I was sitting in sophomore biology, and I remember as clear as day, how did that just happen?
Yeah.
And I remember my very next thought, I just went, I pushed it down and I said, I'll figure it out. Somebody will explain it to me later. I don't really need to know. And I really, I was just so content in my agnosticism. I suppressed the truth. In unrighteousness, I did exactly what that professor did.
Mm-hmm.
Only
Right.
I was a sophomore in high school.
I was gonna say, yeah.
Right. So and this is the reason why we're talking about this. It is about the need for good storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And it is something you're trying to accomplish and reaching out to the Christian community to say, look, we need to challenge culture
Mm-hmm.
with good storytelling. The word of God is alive and active and powerful, sharper than a two-edged sword. That is true. But sometimes you have to wake up the mind in advance of delivering the gospel so
Mm-hmm.
that they can understand what you're talking
Well,
about.
it's good pedagogy. It's good. I mean, Jesus used stories.
I'm gonna say Jesus, yeah. I mean,
And
obviously none of my stories would compare to his parables, but yeah,
no,
there was a reason he told those stories. And I was reading one of the things they thought was very effective because he would be speaking to all kinds of different people in those crowds. And he had the Pharisees, he had just the crowds, he had disciples, and those stories united them and they got something from it because they were obviously from the times too, so they understood that, like the Good Samaritan. I mean, they were all supposed to be horrible people, and so he got a message across with that. So yeah, stories obviously our greatest example of how powerful stories could be are from our Savior. So
Right. Absolutely.
yeah.
All right. Well, we're gonna. All I had to give in the description was your Facebook page. Do you have an actual website that we could include?
yes, I do. Thank you. It's Gayla Prewitt, and Prewitt's PREWITT.com. And I have different tabs on my website, and on the film and novels tab, they can click on that. And there's a POC trailer that we kind of shot to kind of give some ideas about what the story's like. And it's very simple. And then, and if anybody's interested, I could even send them the pitch deck so they could email me. And there's a place on there they can contact me if they'd like to know more. And then there's also the link with how to donate and an article about Dr. Alveda King too. So, and the Pathway did an article and it's on there. So, yeah. So GaylaPrewitt.com.
Gayla Prewitt, Gayla, Gayla Prewitt, Prewitt.
Yes.
.com.
Yes.
And I will put that in the description panel as well. And I trust you will hear from at least some of the people that watch this. I can't guarantee that, of course. We call ourselves the Unknown Webcast because we are relatively unknown, and we're okay with that.
Right. That's okay. Yeah. I appreciate your time and you having me. So thank you.
Thank you for coming.
All right. And Ron, would you care to walk us out of here?
Let's give credit to whom credit is due. Our resident cult leader profiler is Neil Before Me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Culinary services are provided by Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Just In Case. Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon and D Opposer. Our Mormon Archives manager is Polydemus. Our Liberal Denominations Bureau Chief is Lucy Goosey. Our transgender issues coverage comes from Ben Hur. Special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys, Ode to Humanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Oleg Pulling. Technical assistance comes through Murky Research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham and Howe. Our grievance resolution director is Giovanna Pisami. Director of Privacy Assurance is Wiretapping. And original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are solely responsible for this content, although you will never be able to prove that in a court of law.
Never happened.
We're still waiting for that suspicious occasion. When
okay, Gayla, thank you for being brave enough to appear with us.
Or foolish enough, we haven't figured out.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah. So, and for everyone watching, do check out her website and look at her stuff and pray for her. This is an important topic.
Yeah,
and the body of Christ could benefit. So.
This is really I don't know. This is a special moment given what just happened at the RNC. We have to decide who we are, not who our political favorites are.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah.
Right. All right, everybody. Adios.
Thank you.